it's time for this week's video, My Hero Academia. This week I'm reviewing episode 1 of volume 5 of Vigilantes. Let me know what you thought about it in the comment section down below, and whilst you're there, be sure to do all the YouTube stuff that YouTube wants you to do, because YouTube is an increasingly scary place for small broadcasters. Support your local small broadcaster today, it will do them a power of good. And a quick reminder before we get into the review itself, I'm currently working up to 105 subscribers. If I can break that goal, then I'll be doing a review of the second My Hero Academia movie, as that's the only one of the movies for My Hero Academia that I've not done a review of as of yet. So that's something we can all work to together. So with all that said and done, let us now get into the review itself, and we start off, as we often do with these reviews, by talking about the positives. And the headline positives for this particular episode is that this episode is called Business as Usual, and this is very much a case of business as usual by name, business as usual by nature. This was an entertaining and fun little adventure with some neat little character moments sprinkled in here and there, and setting us up for a rather interesting narrative thrust for this particular volume. I'm kind of in a bit of a mixed space right now as to what I think we'll get in this particular volume, as I get a feeling that this volume might end up becoming something of a palette cleanser arc, though at the same time I'm not entirely sure about that for reasons which will be discussed later on, because let's be honest, the tone in this first episode suggests it could go either way, quite honestly. We are very much in the aftermath of the big gig and the whole battle between Knuckleduster and B. Maybe a couple of days after the fact, it really doesn't matter, we're now just in the aftermath period. And, you know, despite the fact that Mikato kind of expanded the scope of the gig a little bit, we're getting into a kind of fallout that you would really expect from it, at least from Popstep's type point of view. Yeah, originally it was supposed to be just a light music thing and ended up turning into a big festival night, but, you know, Popstep just seems to have got the kind of career boost out of all of this that you kind of would expected that she had done. She's been getting fan mail! A whole 3 letters of fan mail! At least one of which might have actually come from someone else who was performing with her. Woo! You know, of course, she's over the moon about all of this, and I'll be honest, I can't really criticise because I get a little bit excited whenever I see my subscriber count going up by one, or I see a like on one of my videos, or a comment, so, you know, in the grand scheme of things, I'm in no position to criticise or take the piss here. You know, it is a nice little opening section, all of this stuff. It has an almost wholesome feel about all of it. Seeing Popstep and Crawl interacting in a fairly human way. I know it kind of sounds odd to say that and really just to have any kind of focus on the pair of them and to praise this episode for that, again, will feel odd, especially bearing in mind that Crawl is supposed to be the main character here, but most of the focus for the previous volume was ultimately on Knuckleduster and B, or at least a lot of the emotive focus for the second half of it, and when it came to doing anything before then, well, it was a little bit more focused on Crawler and Mikato, and that was all building up for this will they, won't they stuff, this whole love triangle thing involving them two and Popstep, which, you know, that's a take it or leave it thing, that's a whole of the discussion for all of a time, but just having these two characters spending time together in just a normal human environment, just spending time together, just makes them feel a lot more human than I think they've really been shown, certainly in the past volume or so. Of course, once we leave the slightly more wholesome and almost slice of things, we have to then get into our villains for this episode, and well, I'd say that this is the moment we have to address the elephant in the room, but at this point it feels like it's time to address the whole entire fucking zoo. So, up until this point in the series, pretty much all the villains that we've had up until now have had like an animal theme to them, or animal or insect theme of it. So, you know, I'm thinking to myself, well, we're getting to a new volume now, B's been defeated, who are we going to get next? What's the next animal theme that we're going to go with? And it seems like we've abandoned that, at least for now, and instead this week, the theme is sex perverts. We have more sex perverts per square inch than the Oscars. We have the return of the gang that steals people's underwear, though this time they're stealing both male and female underwear. I'm not really sure if this is the bisexual representation this series needed, but hey-ho, that's what we get. But hey, Crawler stops them, and how he stops them is fun. Like, he goes to intercept them, but then they just jump over him. Then he swings around to get them again, and they just jump over him again. It's still a little gag thing. It's fun for what it is, and they're defeated almost as soon as they come along, and the angry crowd of people who had their underpants stolen go and kick the shit out of them, which is fun. And then we get introduced to that Icarus guy. Like, I'm gonna be honest, when they were first introduced, I thought they were going to set them up as being like the big villain for this particular volume, because they were introduced in such a weird, spooky and way, and they were given this enigmatic speech. And with this being the first episode of a new volume, again, there was a part in the back of my head thinking, okay, are they going to be the big bad here? Because they fit the animal theme again, because they have wings, and then they take their clothes off and start to fly, and I'm thinking, okay, so are they like a Meta Liberation Army supporter, because those guys want to use their quirks in public without needing a license or being able to use them in their truest form? Or are we going to pivot into more about the societal pressures that some people have to face because of the nature of their quirk? Like, quirks are more than just a superpower, they're something that's ingrained into the physical identity of people, and in order for some people to use their quirks, it could put other people's lives at risk, put other people in danger, or alternatively could have people just go, ooh, dangly bits, when they end up seeing them having to use them. And I was thinking, oh, maybe we're going to get into a little bit of that, when we're going to this character, someone who feels really repressed, and now was the moment where they're going to just expose themselves into the world so that they can, like, feel truly themselves, and it's going to set up this big moral dilemma. But no, they're just doing this because it gets their rocks off, because that is their quirk. This is such a weird episode. Like, the previous volume, we had this big storyline with Knuckleduster and his daughter, and the intro blurb to this particular episode, and I think the volume itself, suggested they were going to get into some really big, deep things, and, you know, we're yet to have the big emotional climax with Knuckleduster and daughter now that Bee's dead, but no, all of a sudden our villains got really, really horny, and it's really fucking weird. Like, if this is the thrust of this entire volume, I'm gonna get banned off YouTube for this, because I'll be honest, it's hard not to turn these reviews into just an endless stream of dick gags from beginning to end, and now we've had a handful of sex-related villains into the mix. Look, I know that some websites are going to be happy about all of this, but me here and now, I'm just thinking to myself, how the hell do I even discuss half this stuff without YouTube slapping a ban or something like that onto me? In the previous volume, only for us at this point a couple of weeks ago, we were dealing with some rather dark subject matter, particularly when we were talking about the nature of what was happening between Knuckleduster and his daughter, and the whole stuff with Bee. And this is the moment where things start pivoting a little bit, where it makes me feel like I don't know what the thrust of this volume's ultimately ending up being, because, you know, again, whilst we are post-gig, we are post the battle of Bee and Knuckleduster, and right now we see Knuckleduster being in a very listless and directionless way. Like, we don't know if he doesn't know what to do with himself, or he's just in a state of mind now where he's thinking to himself, okay, what do I do with my life now? And you know what, there's some stuff that's been said in the blurb, I'm going to hold off because it might be spoiler stuff, but there is a part of me that does feel that maybe we need that meeting with him and Tamo so that we can kind of get a little bit more of a conclusion to all of this, because this whole stuff that we're teasing here with Knuckleduster is the thing that makes me unsure as to whether or not this volume's going to be this big, wacky, silly adventure with goofy villains to kind of take a little bit of the sting out of the previous volume, or if we are going to get into this deeper, more emotive stuff. Because if we go on first impressions, then yeah, it's probably going to be a little bit more goofy than the previous one, and the stuff with Knuckleduster and his daughter is there to add depth to everything, there to add flavour, to make this feel a little bit less of just endless knockabout fun, because I know that a volume that introduced Captain Celebrity might have been a bit beyond the pale for some people, but on the other hand of it, the stuff that we're using for our narrative, or rather our dramatic base here, is Knuckleduster coming to terms with everything that's just happened to him. It's him trying to reconnect with his functionally estranged daughter and his probably terminally ill wife. It's kind of hard to connect the emotive core with Knuckleduster with the wackier sex pest villains that we've had in this episode. I mean, it can be done, but given how much difficulty the previous volume had in trying to balance two things at once, when the tonal distinction between the two of them wasn't as vast as this one, I really don't know. But I have to say, though, that as a whole entity, and I don't want to make it sound like I'm coming down this episode, because I really did enjoy it. It was really just goofy knockabout fun, but, you know, this episode really works as the first episode of a new volume, or alternatively, the first episode of a new season. Because in the intro blurb to this volume, one of the head writers discuss about how this is kind of their intent, this is season 2 to them. Like, everything we've had up to this point from has just been season 1, now this is season 2, and I could see this fitting in tone with the first episode of a new season. Though I will admit that I do feel like Volume 1 and 2 work well as a season 1, Volume 3 and 4 works as a season 2, and this works at the start, good as a start for a season 3, but, you know, how they divide all this up I really don't know, because I'm not entirely sure about how well this story thus far really lends itself to a television programme. How you would divide it up, let me know in the comment section down below, but between then and now, let's get into the negatives. And I have to say is that, you know how I complained about the possible overhang from the previous volume into this one? You know what, I wouldn't have minded getting into that overhang here and now. I do know that it does start to pick up in the next episode, because I've read ahead a little bit, but, you know, it does feel a little bit screwy to me that the majority of this episode, whilst it is good, goofy, knockabout fun, I just want to see the drama here of Knuckleduster trying to reconnect with his family, and his absence for most of this episode feels incredibly conspicuous. And all too often we had characters saying, "Where is Knuckleduster?" like people were saying, "Where's Poochie?" Like, he's such an arresting presence that to not have him here just feels really odd to me. And again, I suppose this is where it kind of feels like it goes back to what I said previously about I'm not entirely sure about the direction of this particular volume, because, yeah, on the one hand, having the first episode of a volume after the previous one, which got rather heavy, having this first episode being so wacky and goofy, I can get and I am appreciative of, particularly bearing in mind I've seen other series recently that don't really know how to add a little brevity when it's really, really fucking needed, but, you know, it's kind of hard to really square that with what's happening with the drama here. Like, it feels like we're in two very different realms stuck at them at the same time, and I'm really not sure how they're going to knock them together. Like, we need to have this conclusion with Knuckleduster. Whether or not he's going to get written out from this point on, we don't know at this point, but we need to conclude this stuff for the stuff that's coming forward, because right now, again, it feels a lot of, where's Poochie? Where's Knuckleduster? Oh, here he is. Alright, there he goes again. So either we're going to quietly this is going to be a volume that's focused about writing him out of the series, at which case, okay, fine. Bit of a disappointment, because I think he's probably the most interesting character that we have here, but, you know, if that's the case, that's fine, but yeah, I don't know how. It feels like they're trying to do two things at once again. They're trying to have the goofy knockabout fun stuff, but they're also trying to do the wrap-up stuff with Knuckleduster. And I don't know how they're going to square the two of them, especially when we look on the cover of this volume, and we also seem to be introducing more characters from the main series. So how the hell we're going to balance all this stuff, I really don't know, but I'm sure we'll find out in future. Anyway, well, that said, let's get into the overview, and I have to say that I think that this is a great opening. All things said, even with my issues with it, I think it's a great kickoff for it, but I do think that this episode needed a little bit more of a hook for it for the remainder of the volume. Like, it feels weird that we're treating family drama as being a when do we get to the fireworks factory bit. Like, that's the thing that we're building up to at the moment. We're building up to that big reunion moment. And yes, I've read ahead a little bit. We do certainly get that in the next episode, though we'll discuss that when we get to the review of that particular one. But aside from that, there's not much really else going on. All the villains introduced this week are disposable ones, which we're only going to see the once, and that's just about it, which is fine, but there needs to be something else here, because again, it just ends up feeling like overhang. But it's not even going into the overhang stuff from last season, or either the last volume. At least not in this particular episode. In the next one it does, but this time, not so much. But we'll see how this all develops going forward. I'm not going to condemn anything out of hand, because it's very early days here. It's very early days indeed. With all that said and done, let's get into Comment Corner! It's time for Comment Corner, and in this week we're going to be talking about the comments from last week's episode, which was discussing Volume 4, when my big Volume 4 review. Watch it, listen to it, it will be really appreciated. As for the here and now, we have Big X1 who says, I enjoyed the volume, but I agree it kind of faded out towards the end. And I do agree to a certain point. I don't think it really faded off, I just think that in the grand scheme of things, it just kind of stopped. As I've said time and again, I kind of think that we needed a little bit more of an emotional payoff to this stuff with Knuckleduster and his daughter. This stuff with Popstep and her goings on felt as though it was resolved a little bit too soon. So in the end, yeah, it kind of did fade off, but I think that fading off, I'd use those words, but hey, you're welcome to your opinion, and by all means, everyone listening to this, leave your opinion down below, and let me know what you thought about this particular episode, and you'll be read out in a future video. But between then and now, I'll just say to you, see you next time. Goodbye! Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, favourite, subscribe, click the bell, and do all the YouTubey stuff that YouTube wants you to do. Go on, it'll do me a power of good. Until next time, my friends, goodbye!